The story begins in 1954 during a security hearing for J. Robert Oppenheimer, a famous physicist. The plot moves back and forth in time, focusing on the years after this event. Admiral Lewis Strauss, along with his assistant, is working against Oppenheimer during a Senate hearing. Strauss suspects that Oppenheimer has connections to communism, but there is also a personal grudge between them. This tension dates back to 1947, when Strauss invited Oppenheimer to join Princeton University. During their meeting, Oppenheimer made a dismissive comment about Strauss's past job as a shoe salesman, which embarrassed Strauss. Later, Strauss observed Oppenheimer speaking with the legendary scientist Albert Einstein. When Strauss attempted to greet Einstein, Einstein ignored him, leaving Strauss humiliated. This led Strauss to believe that Oppenheimer had said something negative about him to Einstein, which fueled his resentment even further. The story flashes back to 1924, where a young J. Robert Oppenheimer is studying physics at Cambridge under the supervision of Patrick Blackett. Oppenheimer is eager to attend a lecture by the famous physicist Niels Bohr, but Blackett insists he stay behind to complete work on his assigned project. Frustrated by this restriction, Oppenheimer impulsively poisons an apple on Blackett's desk with potassium cyanide before sneaking away to attend Bohr's lecture. The next day, Oppenheimer gets the chance to meet Bohr in person. During their interaction, he notices Bohr reaching for the poisoned apple and quickly stops him from eating it. Instead of focusing on the incident, Bohr is struck by Oppenheimer's intelligence and the depth of his research. He advises the young physicist to pursue his education in an environment where he can feel more freedom to explore and grow intellectually. This encounter becomes a pivotal moment in Oppenheimer's journey as a scientist. Oppenheimer continues his education at the University of Göttingen, where he focuses on earning his PhD in physics. During his time there, he befriends fellow physicist Isidor Rabi, and together they cross paths with the renowned theoretical physicist Werner Heisenberg. Oppenheimer greatly admires Heisenberg, considering him a significant influence on his own work and research. After completing his studies, Oppenheimer returns to the United States and begins teaching at the University of California, Berkeley. Among his colleagues is Ernest Lawrence, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, who, along with others, affectionately calls him Oppie. At first, Oppenheimer's lectures attract only one student, Giovanni Lomanitz. However, over time, his reputation and teaching style draw more attention, and his classes grow significantly, eventually becoming filled with eager students inspired by his brilliance and passion for physics. Later in his life, Oppenheimer attends a gathering hosted by members of the Communist Party, accompanied by his younger brother, Frank, and his girlfriend. At the event, he meets Håkon Chevalier, with whom he forms a close friendship. This marks a period when Oppenheimer becomes acquainted with the social and political ideas circulating within the group. Around the same time, Oppenheimer meets Jean Tatlock, a woman who would become an important figure in his personal life. They engage in conversation, which quickly leads to an intimate relationship. After they sleep together, Jean begins browsing through the books on Oppenheimer's shelf. She pulls out a volume written in Sanskrit and asks him to translate a passage. Oppenheimer reads aloud, "And now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." This quote leaves a lasting impression, reflecting themes of power and consequence that will resonate deeply in Oppenheimer's future work. Oppenheimer visits a ranch in Los Alamos with his younger brother Frank and his colleague Ernest Lawrence. During the trip, Frank and his girlfriend reveal that they have officially joined the Communist Party. Although Oppenheimer himself holds progressive political views, he advises them against this decision, aware of the scrutiny such affiliations could bring. Despite his caution, Oppenheimer's own left-leaning beliefs often raise suspicion among those around him. Oppenheimer publicly voices his support for the Spanish Revolution, which prompts Lawrence to question his judgment. Additionally, he becomes a member of the Federation of Architects, Engineers, Chemists, and Technicians, an organization associated with progressive political causes. This involvement only deepens concerns that Oppenheimer might have communist ties, adding to the growing scrutiny of his political activities and associations. During an afternoon out with Jean, Oppenheimer sees one of his students, Luis Alvarez, reacting frantically because news has broken that the Germans have split the uranium nucleus by bombarding neutrons through nuclear fission. Later, during a party with effect, Oppenheimer learns of Hitler invading Poland. Oppenheimer later meets Catherine Kitty Puning, a member of the Communist Party who was already in a failing marriage. After she splits from her husband, Kitty begins a relationship with Oppenheimer, eventually marrying and getting pregnant by him. He goes to break things off with Jean, who is upset despite earlier trying to tell Oppenheimer that she did not want to continue the affair. Kitty gives birth to a son, Peter, and she becomes an alcoholic. The two leave Peter with Chevalier while they take a trip. At the university, Oppenheimer is met by General Leslie Groves and Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Nichols to recruit him to be the director of the Manhattan Project to develop an atomic bomb during World War II. Oppenheimer begins to recruit other scientists such as Richard Feynman, Kenneth Bainbridge, Seth Nettermeyer, Lily Hornig, as well as Lomanitz and Alvarez. They set up shop in Los Alamos, where they construct a fake town near the testing site. Edward Teller is brought in, and after he reviews the schematics and components of the bomb, Oppenheimer and the others realize with horror that in the wrong hands, a hydrogen bomb more powerful than the atomic bomb can be developed and possibly cause a chain reaction that will destroy the world. After some more research, the chances are reduced to near zero. Another flash forward shows Oppenheimer forming a program for the hydrogen bomb with the Atomic Energy Commission. The men gather with their colleagues after the Soviet Union tests their atomic bomb. Strauss and Nichols, both staunch anti-communists, discuss the notion that there were several communists working on the Manhattan Project. During the security hearing, Oppenheimer's involvement with Chevalier is discussed due to him trying to get information on the project on behalf of the Russians, which was treasonous. Lomanitz was also drafted due to his involvement in left-wing politics, making him look like a risk. The matter is also complicated further during Oppenheimer's time on the project when he meets Colonel Boris Pash, who is the project's head of security and also personally goes after communists. An anti-communist lawyer, William Borden, presents the members of the hearing with an indictment on Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer's relationship with Jean is also called into question, with flashbacks showing that he continued their affair. He admits to his adultery with Kitty present in the room, and she envisions Jean having sex with her husband in front of her. In 1949, Jean commits suicide via an overdose and drowning in the bathtub, although there is a quick glimpse of what appears to be a hand forcing her head into the water, suggesting Jean was possibly murdered and was set up to look like a suicide. Kitty finds Oppenheimer in the woods having a breakdown over the news, but she tells him to pull himself together. Sometime during the project's development, Bohr is brought to Los Alamos after being stuck in Europe due to Nazi occupation. He contributes to the project's work with Oppenheimer and Teller. Bohr tells Oppenheimer that he is giving mankind the power to destroy themselves. After Hitler's death, the team continues with the project since they know the Japanese are continuing their wartime efforts. The team carries out several bomb tests. After some time, they perfect their bomb and get ready to initiate what Oppenheimer calls the Trinity test. Everyone gathers at a safe distance at night and prepare for the outcome. The bomb detonates and produces a powerful mushroom cloud and subsequent shockwave. Oppenheimer then repeats the phrase, "And now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The team celebrates their success. President Harry Truman later drops atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which begins to weigh on Oppenheimer's conscience over the resulting casualties. He gives a speech to the team, who are all cheering him on, but he envisions the effect of the bomb incinerating everyone. Oppenheimer later meets Truman, who initially congratulates him on the bomb's development. But when Oppenheimer says he has blood on his own hands, Truman sends him out and calls him a crybaby. Years later, around the time of the Senate hearing, Strauss tells his aide that Frank was blacklisted from every university due to being a communist. Lomanitz ended up working on a railroad, and Chevalier went into exile. Oppenheimer had begun to try for an arms control program as opposed to one for the hydrogen bomb, but Truman rejected it. Strauss had also informed Oppenheimer that one of the members of the Manhattan Project, Klaus Fuchs, was a spy for the Soviets and fed them information on their research and development. Oppenheimer's advocacy for stopping development of further nuclear weapons is looked down upon due to the Cold War. Strauss is also seen working with Borden and Nichols to try and get more dirt on Oppenheimer. Throughout the time of the security hearing, Kitty becomes angry at Oppenheimer for seemingly trying to self-sabotage himself so that he may look like a martyr due to his guilt over his creation. Oppenheimer is interrogated by Roger Robb as others like Teller, Robbie, Groves, and Pash give testimonies about their time spent with the man. Robb demands to know where Oppenheimer's views on nuclear weapons development changed, and he says it was when he realized that America would use whatever weapon that had to win at all costs. Because of Teller and Groves, Oppenheimer is ultimately deemed loyal to America, but he has his security clearance revoked and loses his political influence. Strauss vies for a position on the Senate, but former technician David Hill gives a testimony against Strauss due to his actions against Oppenheimer over personal grievances, including a moment during another hearing where Oppenheimer referred to Strauss as being more useful than a sandwich. Strauss loses his chance at the Senate, and the aide turns on him after realizing his intentions. The aide also lets him know that JFK was against Strauss's actions. We then see the conversation Oppenheimer has with Einstein before Strauss approaches them. One more flash forward in their discussion shows Oppenheimer in 1963 receiving the Enrico Fermi Award from President Lyndon B. Johnson. They talk about the implications that their work in nuclear weapons may have started a chain reaction that has doomed the world. Oppenheimer then sees visions of nukes going off around the world, engulfing the planet in fire and ash. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video like this.